Over the years, we've seen some incredible Formula 1 dynasties. Mercedes between 2014 and 2020, the Michael Schumacher and Ferrari collaboration between 2000 and 04, Red Bull in the early 2010s, and now the same team are writing a new record in the history books with Max Verstappen at the forefront. Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Joe Tyrrell and welcome back to GP Blog. The current Red Bull setup looks simply unstoppable right now, and we're only one race into the new season, but people are talking about Max Verstappen winning every race. It looks like they could go one better than last season, with Perez and Verstappen simply emphatic in Bahrain. Given their current form and record in recent years, does that make them the most dominant sports team in F1 history? Well, that's impossible to say. It's a matter of opinion. But what we can do is stack them up against some of the greatest F1 teams in history and compare their stats. So for the purpose of this task, I'm going to be comparing Red Bull 2021 to present with Michael Schumacher and Ferrari of the early 2000s, Red Bull in the early 2010s, and Mercedes between 2014 and 2020. These are the eras of F1 I'm most familiar with, and it wouldn't be fair in my opinion to comment on teams and records that I have no opinion or knowledge of and haven't watched on TV. If you've got a team prior to any of these that you think should be ranked, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. The first and one of the biggest markers is longevity. Now the current Red Bull era falls way short of any of these. Vettel's prime and Schumacher's lasted 4 and 5 years respectively, and the Mercedes dominance went on for 7 seasons and has got to be up there in terms of longevity in sporting history, full stop. Now Red Bull and Max could match that, but they are a long way off getting close to Vettel at 4 years, let alone Mercedes. If we're going to compare them to anyone at the moment, Red Bull should be put alongside Alonso and Renault, both at 2 titles in 2 years. Well, that's that right. The end of the video. Wrong. This is a GP Blog video. It's never that simple. This Red Bull team is completely ridiculous, and some of the numbers are absurd, so let's dig a little deeper. Points per race. Now over the years, we've had a lot of different point systems, so we're going to match all the points to the current system, ignoring fastest laps and sprint races. 25 points for a win, 18th for second, 1 for 10th, etc, etc. This involved me using my brain, so I'm hoping the maths is correct, but the Ferrari era of Barrichello and Schumacher between 2000 and 2004 is first up. They started 168 races between them. Barrichello didn't start 2 in 2002, so we've removed these because Schumacher still raced. That means they scored 2,611 points at an average of 31.45 points per race. Next up, Red Bull between 2010 and 2013. The duo of Vettel and Mark Webber scored 2,204 points over 144 races at an average of 30.6, almost a point less than Barrichello and Schumacher. Mercedes longevity-wise is possibly the greatest, but how about points per race? Hamilton missed the Sakir Grand Prix, so between himself, his replacement George Russell, Bottas and Nico Rosberg, they featured 276 times and scored 34.4 points per race, the best so far and quite significantly as well. Onto the current Red Bull spell, and we've taken out points for sprint races. We're talking normal races only. Believe it or not, this Red Bull team are bottom of the pile. They come in at 29.65 points per race, putting them lower than Red Bull's previous era of dominance. Admittedly, they are a much smaller sample size, and this could change drastically just this season. But despite being completely overpowered, they still rank bottom in this list. Okay, what about percentage of points won? Sticking with the same format, if Red Bull scored a 1-2 at every race since the start of the 2021 season, scoring a maximum of 43 points, they'd have 1,943 points. But we know they've scored 1,334.5 points, giving them a score of around 68%. So how do they stack up? Schumacher and Barrichello, well, they'd score 3,619 points, but they actually got 2,634, giving them a percentage of around 72%. Red Bull in the 2010s, they get a percentage of 71%, which is incredibly close. And finally, Mercedes scored a whopping 80% of their possible maximum points haul, putting them top, and it means that current Red Bull are bottom. Our third and final measure will be the percentage of race wins. How many race wins do each era have compared to their total entries? Let's run this in reverse, starting with Red Bull. They've competed 45 times since the start of 2021 and won 27. That's 60%. Mercedes, they won 102 of 138 races, 73%. What about Vettel and Webber between 2010 and 2013? If you remember, Max smashed Seb's race win record last season. That era saw Red Bull win 41 out of 77 races, about 53%, so the lowest so far. And finally, Ferrari in the early 2000s, they won 57 out of 85 possible entries, putting them at 67%, and of course at 2 races, they only had 1 car. So in order, it's Mercedes, Ferrari, the current Red Bull, and then Vettel's era. A brief mention on lead drivers. Verstappen over the last 2 or so years would actually be 3rd overall on points per race, beating Vettel and missing out to Schumacher and Hamilton. So, what does this tell us? Well, it's absolutely impossible to give a definitive greatest of all time. It's the same with drivers. Some will say Hamilton, some Schumacher, others Senna, and some might even say Verstappen. But we only have numbers to compare them, and there are so many variables at play. Locations, cars, and above all, luck. For the purpose of this, we're going to say Mercedes are the best of all time. How do they stack up against other teams from other sports? Well, longevity, they are certainly up there. In my lifetime, I'm looking at the Spain and Barcelona football teams between 2008 and 2012. Mercedes beat them. The Australian women's cricket team certainly rivals them and maybe even beats them. Their current era starts all the way back in 2010 and is still going now. Rugby fan? Well, the New Zealand men's team starting in 2010 is another incredible team. 2 World Cups, but Mercedes still beat them. However, as I've already said, so much of it is down to opinion. People might argue it's the car, not the driver with F1, and you'll struggle to get a definitive answer. Back to the point of this video. Are Red Bull the greatest team of all time? Probably not. However, a lot could change this season, and they are certainly on their way to going down in the history books if they hadn't already. This video made me do a lot of maths, so if you've made it this far, please leave a comment with your greatest sports team of all time. Like this video and please subscribe, it helps us more than you can imagine. However, that's all from me today. Until next time, goodbye.